Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joseph William Clausen, otherwise known as Q4659, and 18 years ago to this day, there was a horrible attack committed by terrorists towards the U.S., otherwise known as the 9/11 hijackings and the fall of the two World Trade Centers. Today, I'll be reading the entirety of the Commission report that for 9/11 right here with me, and so today I will be reading it. I don't know how long this will take, but I will read it to its entirety and fully read it so we can fully reflect back on what happened 18 years ago, such as tragedy. I will start now. We present the narrative of this report as the recommendations that flow to the President of the United States Congress, and the American people for their consideration. 10 commissioners, 5 Republican, 5 Democrat, chosen by elected leaders of our nation's capital at a great time of partisan division, have come together to present this report without dissent. We have come together with unity of purpose because our nation demands it. September 11th, 2001 was a day of unprecedented shock and suffering in the history of the United States. The nation was underprepared. How did this happen, and how can we avoid such tragedy again? To answer these questions, the Congress and the President created the National Commission on Terrorist Acts upon the United States, Public Law 107-306, November 27, 2002. Our mandate was sweeping. The law dictated us to investigate facts and circumstances related to the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, including those related to intelligence agencies, law enforcement agencies, diplomacy, immigration issues, and border control, the flow of assets to terrorist organizations, commercial aviation, the role of congressional oversight, and resources allocation, and other areas determined relevant by the Commission. In pursuing our mandate, we have reviewed more than 2.5 million pages of documents and interviewed more than 1,200 individuals in 10 countries. This included nearly every senior official from the current and previous administrations who had responsibility for topics covered in our mandate. We have sought to be independent, impartial, throughout, nonpartisan. From the outset, we have been committed to share as much of our investigation as we can with the American people. To that end, we held 11 days of hearings and took public testimony from 160 witnesses. Our aim has not been to assign blame. Our aim has been to provide the fullest possible account of the events surrounding 9/11 and to identify lessons learned. We learned about an enemy who is sociocratic, patient, disciplined, and lethal. Our enemies rallied board support in the Arab and Muslim world by demanding redress of political grievances. But its hostility towards us and our value is limitless. Its purpose is to rid the world of religious and political pluralism, diplomatic of equal rights for women. It makes no distinction between military and civilian targets. Collateral damage is not in its lexicon. We learn that the institution charged with protecting our borders, civil aviation, and did not adjust their policies, plans, and practices to deter or defeat it. We learned of fault lines within our government, between foreign and domestic intelligence, between and within agencies. We learned of the pervasive problems of managing and sharing information across large and unwieldy government that had been built in a different era to confront different dangers. At the outset of our work, we said we were looking backward in order to look forward. We hope this terrible loss, we hope that the terrible loss chronological in this report can be something positive. An American that is safer and stronger and wiser. That September day we came together as a nation. The task before us is to sustain that unity of purpose and meet the challenges now confronting us. We need to design a balanced strategy for the long haul, to attack terrorists and prevent their ranks from swelling while at the same time protecting our country from future attacks. We have been forced to think about the way our government is organized. The massive departments and agencies that prevailed in the great struggle in the 20th century must work together in new ways that all instruments of national power can be combined. Congress needs dramatic change as well to strengthen oversight and focus accountability. As we complete our final report, we want to begin by thanking our fellow commissioners whose dedication to this task was profound. We have reasoned together on every page, and the report has benefited from this remarkable dialogue. We want to express our considerable respect for the intellect and judgment of our colleagues, as well as our great affection for them. We want to thank the Commission staff, that dedicated professional staff headed by Philip Zickow has contributed insurmountable hours to the completion of this report, setting aside other important endeavors to take on this all-consuming assignment. They have conducted exhausting and investigative work upon which the Commission has built, that has given good advice and faithfully carried out our guidance. They have been superb. We thank Congress and the President. Executive branch agencies have searched records and produced a multitude of documents for us. We thank officials past and present who were generous with their time and provided us with insight. The Pentboom team at the FBI, the Directors Review Group at the CIA, Inspector General at the Department of Justice, the CIA provided great assistance. We owe a huge debt to their investigative labors, that painstaking attention to detail, and readiness to share what they have learned. We have built on the work of several previous commissions, and we thank the Congressional Joint Inquiry, whose fine work helped us get started. We thank the City of New York for assistance with documents, witnesses, government printing office, and W.W. Norton and Company for helping get this report to the broad public. We conclude this list of thanks by coming full circle. We thank the families of 9/11, whose persistence and dedication helped us create the Commission. They have been with us each step of the way as partners and witnesses. They know better than any of us the importance of the work we have undertaken. We know that what we have done isn't we know what we have done and not done. We have endeavored to provide the most complete account of the events of September 11th, what happened and why. This final report is only a summary of what we have done, citing only a fraction of the sources we have consulted. But in an event of this scale, touching so many issues, organizations, we are conscious of our limits. We have not interviewed every knowledgeable person or found every relevant piece of paper. New information inevitably will come to light. We present this report as a foundation for better understanding of a landmark in history for our nation. We have listened to scores, overwhelming personal tragedies, and astounding acts of heroism and bravery. We have examined the staggering impact of the events of 9/11 on the American people and their amazing nation to do their best to prevent another tragedy while preparing to respond if it becomes necessary. We emerge from this investigation with enormous sympathy for the victims and their loved ones, and with enhanced respect for the American people. We recognize the formidable challenges that lie ahead. We also approach the task of recommendations with humility. We have made a limited number of them. We decide consciously, to focus on recommendations we believe it to be most important, whose implementation can make a great difference. We came into this process with strong opinions about what would work. All of us have to pause, reflect, and sometimes change our minds as we study these problems and considered views of others. We hope our report will encourage our fellow citizens to study, reflect, and act. That is the end of the preface. And now we enter the commission report. 1. We have some plans. Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. Dawn temperatures nearly cloudless in the eastern United States. Millions of men and women readying themselves for work. Some made their way to the Twin Towers, signature structures of the World Trade Center complex in New York City. Others went to Arlington, Virginia to go to the Pentagon. Across the Potomac River, the United States Congress was back in session. At the end of Pennsylvania Avenue, people began to line up for a White House tour. In Sarasota, Florida, President George W. Bush went for an early morning run. For those heading to an airport, weather conditions could not have been better for a safe, pleasant journey. Among the travelers were I'm gonna butcher this name so hard. I am so sorry. Mohammed Atta and Abul Azza Omar, who arrived in the airport in Portland, Maine. The inside 1.1 inside the 4 flights. Boarding flights: Boston, America 11, United 175. Atta and Omirai. This is gonna be so butchered, I know. Boarded a 6 a.m. flight from Portland to Boston Logan International Airport. When he checked in for his flight to Boston, Atta was selected by computerized pre-screening system known as CAPS, Computer Assisted Passenger Pre-Screening System, created to identify passengers who should be subject to special security members. Under security rules in place at time, the only coincidence of Atta's selection by CARPS was that he decided to check his bag. His checked bags were held off the plane until it was confirmed that he had boarded the aircraft, not to hinder Atta's plans. This did not hinder Atta's plans. Atta and Omar arrived in Boston at 6:45. 7 minutes later, Atta apparently took a call from Mohan Nashiri, a longtime colleague who was at another terminal at Logan Airport. They spoke for 3 minutes. It would be their final conversation. Between 6:45 and 7:40, Atta and Omar, along with Samat Alasquim, Wada Alashiri, checked in and boarded American Airlines Flight 11, bound for Los Angeles. The flight was scheduled to depart at 7:45. In another Logan terminal, Shaji joined Faiz Bahamad, Mahmoud Ashiri Ahmad, and Jami Al-Gajami, and Hayaz. Any of these names, I'm so just gonna butcher. Checked in for United States Air Flights 175, also bound for Los Angeles. A couple of his colleagues were obviously unused to travel, according to the United ticket agent. They had trouble understanding the standard security questions. She had to go over them slowly and gave them a routine, reassuring answers. The flight was scheduled to depart at 8 o'clock. The security checkpoints through which passengers, including Atta and his colleagues, gained access to American 11 Gate were operated by Global Security under contract with American Airlines. In a different terminal, the single checkpoint through which passengers of United's 175 passed through, controlled by United Airlines, had contracted with Hutlight USA to perform the screening. In passing through these checkpoints, each of the hijackers would have been screened by a walk-through metal detector calibrated to detect items with at least metal content of a .22 handgun. Anyone who might set off the detector have been screened with a wand and produced, requiring screening to identify metal items that caused the alarm. In addition, an X-ray machine would have screened the hijackers' carry-on belongings. The screening would have identified the confiscate weapons and other items prohibited from being carried onto American flight, on a commercial flight. None of these checkpoint supervisors recalled the hijackers or reported any suspicious regarding the screening. While Atta had been selected by CARPS in Portland, 3 members of his hijacking team, Squami Wal and Ashi al-Ashir, were selected in Boston. The selection affected only the handling of their bags, not their screening at the checkpoint. All 5 men cleared the checkpoint and made their way to the gate for American 11. Atta and Omar and Sugam took their seats in business class, seats 8D, 8G, and 10B respectively. The Shiri brothers had adjacent seats in row 2, while in 2A, Walid and 2B. In the first class cabin, they boarded American 11 between 7:31 and 7:40. The aircraft pushed back from the gate at 7:40. Shahid and his team, none of whom were selected by CARPS, boarded United 175 between 7:23 and 7:28. Muhammad in 2A, Shiri in 2B, Shani in C6, Amaz Al-Ghami in 9C, and Ahmad Al-Ghanar in 9D. The aircraft pushed back from the gate just before 8 o'clock. Washington Dulles, American 77. Hundreds of miles southwest of Boston at Dulles International Airport, the Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C. 5 more men were preparing to take an early morning flight at 7:15. A pair of them, Khalad Al-Mahirad and Majid Mokud, checked in at the American Airlines ticket counter for Flight 77, bound for Los Angeles. Within the next 20 minutes, they would be followed by Ina Azur and 2 brothers, Naf Al-Hamiz and Salem Hamiz. Again, these are all really butchered because I can't pronounce these names. Hani Azur Kala Al-Himahad and Majad Mokud were flagged by CARPS. The Amaz brothers were also selected for an extra security by airline customer service representatives at the self-check-in counter. He did because one of the brothers did not have a photo identification, nor did he understand English, because the agent found both of the passengers to be suspicious. The only coincidence of their selection that checked bags were held off the plane until it was confirmed that they had boarded the aircraft. All 5 hijackers passed through main terminals, West Security Screening Checkpoint. United Airlines was responsible air carrier and had contracted out the work to Agent Bright Security. The checkpoints featured closed-circuit television, CCTV, or closed-circuit television, that recorded all passengers, including the hijackers, as they were screened. At 7:18, Mahar and Mokud entered the security checkpoint. Mahar and Mokud placed their carry-on bags on the belt of the X-ray machine, proceeded through the first metal detector. Both set off alarms. They were directed to the second metal detector. Mahar did not trigger the arm and was permitted through the checkpoint. After Mokud set it off, the screener wanted them. He passed this inspection. How did he pass the inspection? About 20 minutes later, at 7:35, another passenger for Flight 77, Ana Ajur, placed 2 carry-on bags on the X-ray in the Terminal's West checkpoint and proceeded without an alarm through the metal detector. A short time later, Nawaf and Salem entered the same checkpoint. Stone cleared the metal detector and was permitted through. Al-Hazim set off the alarms for both first and second metal detectors, then hand wrapped before being passed. In addition to his over-the-shoulder carry-on bag was swiped an explosive trace detector and then passed. The video footage indicates he was carrying an unidentified item in his back pocket, clipped to its rim. When the local Civil Attention Security Office of the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, later investigated the security screening operations. The screenings recalled nothing out of the ordinary. They could not recall any of the passengers who were screened by CARPS selectees. We asked a screening expert to review the videotape of hand waiting and found the quality of the screener's work to be marginal at best. The screeners should have resolved what set off the alarm in the case of both Mahmoud and Aham. It was clear that they did not. At 7:50, Majid Mahmoud, Gilhud Amar boarded the flight and were seated in 12A and 12B in coach. Hama Hajur assigned to seat 1B, first class. Soon followed the Hamas brothers, sitting in 5E and 5F. Joined Moore in the first class cabin. Newmark United 93, between 7:03 and 7:39. Salih Hajim Gamar and Al-Jim Hama and Hazinzwa and Hajijara checked into United Airlines ticket counter for flight 93 going to Los Angeles. All these are going to Los Angeles. They did checking 2 bags. Did not Hawan was selected by CARPS. Checking his bag was screening explosives and loaded onto the plane. 4 men passed through the security checkpoint, owned by United Airlines, operated under contract by Agent Bright Security. Like checkpoints in Boston, it lacked closed-circuit television surveillance, so there was no documentary evidence that would indicate when the hijackers passed through the checkpoint what alarms may have been triggered or what security procedures were administered. The FAA interviewed screeners later. None could recall anything unusual or suspicious. I don't know what was going on then. The 4 men boarded the plane between 7:39 and 7:48. All four had seats in first class cabin. The plane had no business class section. Hajur was in seat 1B, closest to the cockpit. Nami was in 3C. And Jamad in 3D. Hazwazi in 6B. 19 men were aboard this transcontinental flights. 19 men were aboard 4 transcontinental flights. They were planning to hijack these planes and turn them into large guided missiles loaded up with 14,400 gallons of jet fuel. By 8 a.m. On the morning of Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, they had deflected all security layers of the American civil aviation security system had in place to prevent hijacking. the hijacking of American 11. American Airlines Flight 11 provided nonstop service from Boston to Los Angeles on September 11th. Captain John Ogonski, with first class officer Thomas McGeans, piloted the Boeing 767, carried its full capacity of 9 flight attendants, 81 passengers aboard the flight with them, including 5 terrorists. The plane took off at 7:59, just before 8:14. It climbed to 20,000 feet. Not quite an initial cruising altitude of 29,000 feet. All communications and flight profile data were normal. All about about this time, the fasten seatbelt sign would usually have been turned off, and the flight attendants would have begun preparing for cabin service. At the same time, American 11 is the last routine communication with the ground when acknowledged navigation instructions from FAA, Air Traffic Control, ATC, Center in Boston. 16 seconds after transmission, ATC instructed the aircraft pilots to climb to 30,000 feet. The message and all subsequent attempts to contact the flight were not acknowledged. From this other evidence, we believe the hijacking began at 8:14 or shortly thereafter. Reports from 2 flight attendants in the coach cabin, Betty Ong and Madeline Amy Sweeney, tell us the most of what we don't know about how the hijacking happened. As it began, some hijackers, most likely Law and Lashir, have been seen in row. Class 1D stabbed 2 unarmed flight attendants who would have been preparing for cabin service. Oh boy. Okay, that was an hour. We do not know exactly how the hijackers gained access to the cockpit. FAA rules that require all doors remain closed and locked during flights. Ong speculated that they had jammed their way in. Perhaps the terrorists stabbed the flight attendants to get into the cockpit, to get the cockpit key to force one of them to open the cockpit door to lure the captain or first officer out of the cockpit, or the flight attendants may have just been in their way. At the same time, shortly thereafter, Atta, the only terrorist aboard, trained to fly a jet, would have moved to the cockpit from business class and seated, accompanied by Amar. This was happening. Passenger Daniel Lewin, who was seated in the row just behind Atat and Amar, was stabbed by one of the hijackers, probably Satim Squami, who was seated directly behind Lewin. Lewin had served for 4 years as an officer in the Israeli military. He had made an attempt to stop the hijacker in front of him, not realizing there was another sitting behind him. The hijackers quickly gained control and sprayed ace pepper spray or some other irritant into the first class cabin, ordered to force passengers and flight attendants towards the rear of the plane. They claimed they had a bomb. About 5 minutes after the hijacking begun, Barry Ong contacted the American Airlines Southern Reservation Office in Cary, North Carolina, by an AT&T phone, AT&T airphone to report emergency aboard the flight. This was the first of several occasions, perhaps on 9/11, flight attendants took action outside of the scope of their training, which emphasized that the hijacking that they were to communicate with the cockpit crew. The emergency call lasted approximately 25 minutes. Ong calmly and professionally relayed the information about the events that took place aboard the airplane to the authorities on the ground. 8:19. On reported. The cockpit is not answering. Somebody stabbed in business class. I think there's mace. We can't breathe. That we can't breathe. I don't know. I think we're getting hijacked. She then told of the stabbings of the two flight attendants. At 8:21, one of the American employees receiving Ong's call, North Carolina Nadeed Ghanaz, alerted American Airlines operations in the center in Fort Worth, Texas, reaching Craig Marquez, the manager on duty. Marquez soon realized that this was an emergency and instructed the airline's dispatcher to responsible for the flight to contact the cockpit at at 8:21. One of the American employees receiving Ong's call. At 8:22, dispatcher tried unsuccessfully to contact the aircraft. 6 minutes later, air traffic control specialist in American Operations Center contacted FAA Boston Air Traffic Control Center about the flight. The center was already aware of the problem. So I need to listen. So by the way, I'm so sorry. I should have been more prepared for this, but this is the best I can do for now. This is just. I'm only at page 23 of all 500 pages. I don't know how far I will get into this. I said I would read the entirety. I might not get to that, but I will at least read for an hour. Sorry, I'll put my down. That was a perceptible thing to do. I'm so sorry. My sincerest apologies go to the. Sorry, give me a second. My sincerest apologies go to the victims and their families. I am so sorry that this tragedy ever happened. I wasn't even born at the time, but I grew up knowing that 9/11 was a respectful day towards the dead of those who died. And I want to extend my most sincerest apologies to everyone, even though I wasn't around then, but I still apologize for all the grievance that has come as a result of this attack. I will read an hour, and then maybe next year I'll read more until I have finished the report. So, I honestly don't know if I have the strength to continue reading this. I don't know. I don't know if I can continue reading this, but this is probably going to be the ending video. I don't know. Reading it more and more, I just don't feel like I could complete this video. I'm sorry, guys. I don't think I can. Thank you for joining me for 23 pages into the Commissioner's report. I need to stop because, I don't know, I'm just not in my mind. This is just, I don't know. I'll try and finish it next year, and if I don't,